Sometimes you have experience and you've done a lot of things in your business, and an opportunity will come your way that is interesting and intriguing. And you maybe question if it's something that you should do or shouldn't do. And it can be quite a wild ride. So today I have with me Jonathan Duggar, who is our resident wellness advocate. But we are going to talk about his experience moving from maybe some more traditional paths in real estate investing into something that completely blew my mind when you decided, and yours, and what it took, what your experience was in purchasing a golf course. And I think that will be a really fascinating discussion, and I'm excited to get into that with you. Hey, you leader, entrepreneur, business owner, solopreneur, whatever you call yourself, we know you're a visionary business builder, wealth seeker looking to combine a passion for doing good with leading consciously. It's time to shift from a traditional focus of pure wealth accumulation to one that integrates well-being and fulfillment. You're here for a purpose, and it's time to shine your light. So here we go. Welcome back to the Conscious Edge podcast. I'm Alicia St. Germain here with my co-host Jonathan Duggar, and we are so excited to be back together. I have to tell you, Jonathan, the number of takes I have to do when I'm doing this by myself. It's so much easier when you're here.
It's easier to be goofy with a pal, especially one that knows you really well.
Yeah, exactly.
It takes the self-criticism out of the equation a little bit too, I think.
Yes. Well, I know our editors. I'm like, edit that. I'm going to restate this. So welcome back. For those of you who are brand new here, Jonathan and I have been having these conversations for 20 plus years, and we decided that we should start a podcast last year. And so we did, and we were having so much fun doing it. So please make sure to hit the follow or subscribe button from wherever you are listening. And Jonathan, I have to tell you, I wanted to shout out to A. Trippin. I have a review here that I think is just so sweet. And it says, Alicia and Jonathan bring their whole selves to this podcast. They are genuine, caring people looking to help others. I've enjoyed listening to the first 3 episodes, and I can't wait for more. So super awesome. Thank you, A. Trippin.
Oh, that's awesome. Thanks, A. Trippin. I love the name too.
So if you've been listening and you have not left a review, please take a moment and leave a review. It helps us know that we're making a difference. It's like a nice little give for our heart and soul. And in the rankings, it helps us get discovered and found by more awesome leaders like you. So please take a moment and do that as well. Okay. So now to today's topic. You bought a golf course. Not recent.
The title of a book.
You bought a golf course. Not recently. So up until the point you had bought the golf course, what kinds of real estate had you had experience in, for those of you who don't know you?
Pretty much every contingent of housing, real estate, and then multifamily apartment complexes, single family homes, and then with a focus kind of on mobile home and RV parks, and then throw in some other randos into the mix that were still more traditional in sense, like self-storage, commercial centers, small commercial centers, strip mall kind of places. So I've done a few of those but the majority in housing related real estate.
So what made you decide, like, I'm going to buy a golf course? Because I never even knew you to be a golfer.
I am not a golfer. and neither is my business partner on that deal.
So
In fact, I have trauma around golf. I might speak to that a little bit too.
So how did this come about?
So just a odd collision of circumstances, basically. So we were looking at a region in Missouri that's kind of a destination area, and we were looking at a mobile home park and had been working on this particular deal for over a year, back and forth with the sellers. They were priced too high, typical pattern of that type of deal layout, deal flow. And finally got to a place where they were motivated enough to accept our original offer, actually, that we had offered a year previous. And in the process of doing that, we started looking for local funding, a local funding source, and we found a bank that had a local presence. And that bank had recently been taken over by another bank. And the previous community bank had a lot of bad debt, and they had taken back a lot of properties. And they had taken back a mobile home park that was right up our alley. So we started in the process of purchasing that as well from the bank. And our banker in this transaction, we were having lunch with him or something, and it's like, well, I was kind of going through our inventory, getting used to what the inventory is that we've got to liquidate. And I'm not sure if any of these things are interesting to you guys. And he starts listing off, like, they had a pet shop, they had a beauty salon, they had like 5 or 6 different businesses. And he goes, I don't know about this one, but it's pretty interesting. We've actually got a golf course and restaurant that we're going to try and sell. And John and I both were my business partner's name is also John. Just kind of looked at each other like, yeah, right. They didn't even enter into our minds that it was a possibility. And we left that lunch and we're driving to one of the parks, actually. And John just says, what do you think about that golf course idea? I'm like, are you crazy? Because I had actually he and I both have been involved in some form of food services in the past. And I'd been a part owner in a restaurant that didn't do well. And so just the restaurant idea was something I had already said I'm going to stay away from. And the golf was so far out of anything that I had ever considered or thought would be, anything that would not only interest me, but that could actually make money, could be a good investment. I'd heard actually stories about those types of luxury properties or disposable income type properties that had performed very, very poorly. And you basically bought them if you wanted to have a hobby and it's not something you actually make money with. So
how long ago was this?
Over 10 years now.
Okay.
So this is the 11th season that we've owned the golf course.
Yeah, because we went to visit you pretty early on. I think Neela was, Jack wasn't even born yet.
Jack was before Jack was born. So
yeah. So she was like about 2, I think.
Yeah. I think we were basically over our hump that I'll talk about in a little bit.
Yeah.
So long story short, we decided to at least get information and ask Jeff our banker, more questions. And one of the things that started swaying our decision to actually consider this, we found out that along with the purchase of the golf course and the restaurant, there was also a substantial amount of real estate involved. So there was like 17 acres that was zoned commercial. There were a number of buildable lots in the golf course community around the course. And John and I both have done development, done construction. And so we started building up this excitement that bred this sort of false courage that we could actually do this. And it's like, we know what we're doing in this area. We're going to pretend we do. So this other area, it's just a sideline, even though that was the main focus of all of it that we knew nothing about. So that's kind of the context behind how we got started with it. And it was probably a couple of months in development of, can we actually do this? Can we actually fund it? What's it going to look like in terms of running it? And trying to figure out, if we were actually going to dive in to the deal. But there was a lot of stupidity or blind faith or courage. We can call it a lot of different things.
Well, because that was one of my questions I had asked you before we started recording was like, how did you find the courage? And you're like, it wasn't really courage. It was just flat out kind of justifications and ignorance and fake it till you make it. Looking backwards, would you have done it differently? Or what would you have to say that you learned from that like decision to jump into something outside of your comfort zone?
Well, I mean, it was has been a very good proving ground that with the right team, the right people, and enough effort, you can pull almost anything off. And because, I mean, oh my goodness, the number of conversations we've had over the years about just throwing in the towel, just walking away, it's been insane. But it did. We may not have started from true courage, but it definitely helped instill some courage out along the way and some confidence that, maybe we actually do know what we're doing, at least to some degree. And what we don't, we'll figure out. So, but yeah, I don't think there was a whole lot of true courage involved with the decision. It was a lot of convincing ourselves that this was a good idea.
Okay.
And putting it in context of, and some of the things were a good idea. Like one of our goals was to sort of start creating regions as opposed to, at one point I was spread out in 19 states. I had investments, all over the country and a couple in Canada. And it was a crazy way to try and run a system. So our goal was to sort of start regionalizing and creating business centers. And that we basically created an instant region by doing this. We owned 3, functioning businesses in a geographic area, basically within a 3-month span.
Okay. So the park was, or not the park, look at me still.
I do it all the time.
The golf course was underperforming when you
It had been bank owned for about 2 years. The restaurant was shut down. There was, and this is one of our saving graces, we had a very stable and very dedicated membership base in the course, and they weren't going anywhere. They had already lived through the worst of it, or what they thought was the worst of it, in terms of, didn't showing up from day to day, not knowing if the doors were going to be open, not knowing where their membership stood, all things like that. So we had not only an advocacy base, like they wanted us to survive and thrive. We had a lot of people with a lot more knowledge than we had of the area, of the course, of the previous ownership, of the course development, like how it was built. Because the course was built in the late 80s, I think. So it's, not that old. It's been there, hadn't been there all that long. And so that was an instant benefit that we had. So, but it was very much underperforming. The bank had hired a person that basically kept the pro shop open and kept the doors open and the lights on, but that was about it. And they had the pro shop guy and a greenskeeper, and then that was it as far as team. That's what we inherited.
Wow. All right. So, I don't even know where to start. What did you tackle first?
So this kind of goes to, sometimes ignorance is bliss, and ignorance actually can breed ingenuity and invention, because we didn't know. So we thought, I come from an academic background, and in real estate, John and I both had been through, a lot of real estate training, formal training and education, and we're advocates of that. So we're like, okay, we've got to get edumacated. We've got to learn how to do this business the right way. And I'm using air quotes if you guys aren't seeing the video on this. So we paid money that we did not have to have a PGA, I can't remember what they call it, but basically a consultant came in and audited the course, spent 2 days there, and then created this huge, like 150, 200 page report for us about what was right, what was wrong, what could be fixed, what could never be fixed. It's sort of was like the logistics, the natural logistics of the course itself, the condition of the greens, the types of grass, the chemicals being used, the business model for bringing in new, raising memberships, the price points of the rates, what the rates included, like tons of data. And some of it was helpful. I will admit some of it was helpful. One of the things that stuck, though, that I hadn't thought of until just now, that was something I kept tracking back to as a positive when everything else felt like it was going down the toilet. This guy said, I've audited hundreds, if not thousands of courses all over the country. And your course has natural beauty elements that could never be built, that people spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to try and replicate. And yours is just part of the landscape, which is true. It's an absolutely beautiful course in a beautiful area. So I kept tracking back to that. It's like, we've got something that other people strive to have, and they, have to pay all this money and not that necessarily solved any.
It was like your little pool noodle that kept your motivation up.
Yes, that was my lifeline every once in a while. That was the ring I was wearing to not drown a couple of times.
Well, and I think what that's a testament to, though, you keep talking about ignorance is bliss, and you had like this false courage and all of this, but ultimately you made a decision to do this, and then you made it right. Yes. And you just were relentless about figuring it out.
Well, and then the second piece of trying to sort of play by the established rules, because there's a business model for golf courses and for golf courses in different parts of the country, and but it's a pretty steep learning curve because a lot of people that own courses, they're either part of a conglomerate that's what they do is they buy courses, or they have either been a player or been somehow related to the industry for a long time. Well, that wasn't the case with us. So John, though, has a good friend that was a PGA pro and some very high dollar, high level courses. So we hired him as our consultant, our business consultant. And he knows what he's doing. He knows exactly what he's doing in most cases. What we did learn, which actually was a good fit for us personally, this course and this little part of the country is very unique in a lot of ways. And its membership base is very unique in a lot of ways. So some of the more fancy services that you offer at golf courses, like simple things like someone to carry your bag from your car to the cart, these people didn't want that. And they definitely didn't want to pay for it. So we basically, after the first season and a half, basically, of trying to play by the standards and the rules, we threw away the rule book and we started writing our own. And we were already figuring out some of those things, just sort of blindly stumbling into, oh, this works for us here, or we can save money. And that's where a lot of our initial motivation to do something different came from. It's like, oh, we are hemorrhaging money. How do we cut back on these things? And John is my business partner. John loves numbers. And I mean, he geeks out on the numbers. So, he was in the bank accounts every day and the P&Ls every day. And he basically created the leanest possible way to run a golf course and keep the doors open, keep the lights on, keep people as happy as possible, keep the courses in good shape. And we created our own rule book. We've talked about we need to write a book about this. The thing is it wouldn't necessarily apply to a lot of people, except maybe to encourage everyone to write their own rule book. The other really, really important piece that I have to mention, because it is still consistently one of our saving graces, our greenskeeper, his name is Chris. He loves the game. He loves that course. He'd been there for a long. We inherited him when we bought the course, and he knows his stuff. He can tell you all about grasses. He can tell you all about fertilizers. He can tell you about, you have this much rain, what it's going to do to this type of grass, and as opposed to another type of grass. He knows it. And he's also for somebody that hasn't been formally educated in business in any way, shape, or form, he has a great business mind. I'll just give you an example. He went from running the green side of the course. He's now our general manager for the entire business. We put him in charge of, because he asked for this, we put him in charge of the pro shop. And pro shops at most golf courses are loss leaders. They bring people in, they're a value add, but they don't really make money. He turned our pro shop into a profit center, partnering with John, who keeps an eye on the numbers and was adamant about, okay, we need to shave costs here. We need to control costs here. We couldn't just give him carte blanche to buy whatever he wanted because we didn't have the kind of money. So, but Chris has consistently been a big part of the restaurant, a big part of the greens and the course itself, and a big part of the membership base. So all of that as a key member, the key member of our team, helped rewrite the rules because we would ask him, so, yeah, I know, we know what the standard is. What would you do? You know our memberships. You know this area. What would you do? So we'd get input and advice from him and figure out how best to apply it and what we could afford to apply. Because sometimes, his ideas would be, oh, that'd be great if we had an extra $100,000 to buy all new equipment, but we don't. So how do we make it work? And those were the conversations we had every day. Okay, this is our budget for this month. This is our break even for this month. This is our, this is what we've got left on our credit line. How do we do this? How do we make this happen? So the first probably 3 years and in the conjunction with that, I think to try and make ourselves feel better because it was something we knew and thought we could control, we decided to renovate the bathrooms and renovate the restaurant with pretty much no money. So that meant we did a lot of the work ourselves.
I remember this.
But yeah, oh my goodness. Yeah. So absolute worst time to do any of this. This is one of the things we talked about earlier is there's no perfect time.
Yeah.
So, but there are definitely times that are way the other extreme in terms of not perfect.
Like bad timing? Is that what you're trying to say? Like
yes,
really
yes.
bad timing?
Bad timing and making decisions based on being in a bad place in life. And I'll just, without giving away too much, private information, sharing too much private information. So we closed on the course in April. We started working on the whole thing probably in November of, I think it was 2013. Yeah, 2013. And so we closed in April of 2014, I think. Well, John had lost his mom in that December. And then I found out in November that my dad had terminal cancer. And then I lost my dad in August. So we had all that going on. Plus we closed on the first mobile home park in that area, which had a lot of things that we had experience with, but still a lot of work involved on the front end. We closed on the first one in December and the second one January, and then closed on the golf course in April at the very beginning of season starting off. So it was like the perfect storm. I almost said a cuss word, but it was a perfect storm of, not great stuff.
Right. And when you're in those modes, it's really easy to default to comfort zones, even if they don't make sense.
Yep.
So it was a lot of challenges and ultimately. And okay, so fast forward a little bit.
Okay.
How are things going? Like how you got everything stabilized? How is it going now?
It's going really well. We've had the majority of the seasons have been great seasons, and the restaurant's doing well. The pro shop still does well. The course still looks great. We have the largest membership that has ever been on that course. And the membership continues to grow. We have some attrition and some turnover because of people aging out and different things like that. But we have a lot of out of town members now that drive in from like Kansas City and St. Louis to play on a regular basis.
Because that area is good for like second homes or like little condos. And like if you have some place you want to go and enjoy nature, and it's just such a cool area. I love it. I don't think we told anybody where it is, but anyways, it's a cool area. So there's a lot a lot to do there. What is unique about this that made you have to throw the rule book out? Like, you mentioned that they don't want somebody to carry their bags, but like if you could
I'll just give you sort of our elitist ideas we had on the front end. Like we kind of follow the rule book of making this a little fancier than it was. And with the restaurant, we had this dream of sort of a farm to table type restaurant. And the restaurant has been our biggest challenge. We actually leased it out for a while. Initially, we ran it ourselves. I was a bartender. My partner ran the kitchen. John helped in the kitchen. John's wife, Danielle, helped out wherever she could. But it was like we were doing it all ourselves, and that was a nightmare. We got it open, though. We started bringing people back. We got the attention back to the restaurant, but we thought the solution initially was to lease it out to somebody that was a restaurant operator. And we had so much challenge with that. And when we took the restaurant back and Chris and his wife basically took it over and started running it and managing it, it is done well. But it's a lot of work because it's, a standalone business in and of itself because it's a full-time operating during season restaurant bar.
So you thought it was going to be farm to table kind of fun and fancy, and it's like chicken fingers and burgers, right?
Yeah. So we try and still have what I would say is high quality food, but we need food that can be prepared quickly, and we need food that's affordable. Yeah. So affordability is a big thing in that area, and it's perceived value. It's perceived value. So if you're going to, let's say, have a craft beer on draft, if it's a beer that people know and recognize and they can get it back home, and that's one of their favorite things to get back home, absolutely they're going to pay $1.50 more for it. If it's something local that a brewer's doing and it's catching on and it tastes really well and it's winning all these awards, that is not perceived value for our customer. Mm. That would interest me. Mm-hmm. That would interest your husband. Mm-hmm. Neil would be, I got to try that one. Mm-hmm. They compare it to some porter that he's had, somewhere else. And he's like, oh yeah, I want to try that. That's not perceived value. Same thing with this sort of the food thing. Same thing with what we carry in the pro shop. So it's like here's knowing your customer, knowing your market base is hugely important because this is a very unique microeconomy and it works in a very specific way.
They like their comfort zone.
Yep. And then another example, here's just a one that just occurred to me for the pro shop. So the pro shop, we have, like you said, we have a lot of people that have second homes there. Or they're coming on like a weekend vacation or something like that. People forget stuff when they travel. So we sell belts, men's and women's belts like crazy. We sell socks like crazy. Things that you wouldn't necessarily, we sell a ton of golf balls because people forgot to bring their golf balls, or things like that. So things that go, yes, with the industry to some degree, but they're not we're not selling a bunch of golf clubs. We're not selling a bunch of expensive shoes. We do sell some shoes though. So it's really is paying attention to feedback from your members, what they would like to see more of or less of, and really drilling down as to the whys of it. And if it makes sense and then paying attention to things that they're asking for that would cost us money, but is there a way we could monetize it? So things like that, like things we do now with our during our tournaments in terms of food sources and things that may cost a little more, but we found out that particular customer base will pay for it. So, those were all really valuable lessons, but that developed over time. That was like you and I've had talked about so many times as entrepreneurs, we learn by doing. And there's been a lot of learning by doing, and we still are. During COVID, that was a lot of extremely valuable lessons were learned during COVID because we had a huge demand. People wanted to get out and play, but there were lots of things we couldn't do, like food we couldn't get, chemicals we couldn't get for, treating the grass, and things we had to do differently because of distancing and, things like that. But one of the things we developed during that time that was hugely profitable for us, we created a pickup pizza business, curbside pizza business out of the restaurant. And there was a demand for it, and nobody else was doing it. So we sold the heck out of, easy make pizzas. They were made from scratch pizzas, but it was quick. We figured out a quick way, and we served 3 kinds of pizzas, and that was it. Couldn't change them up. And we sold them all. We sold out of them every single day we had them.
Interesting. What an incredible journey. Anything that you would have done differently?
Oh goodness, that would be a whole nother podcast. But what I
top thing that sticks out in your mind.
Not done the restaurant renovation when we did, or done a much scaled back, like sort of a fluff and buff, and then decide what we really need. Redo the decks outside much sooner than we did. They were fairly expensive, and we had already spent the money that we could have spent there. Reallocate that money, and really drill down on figuring out the restaurant sooner than we did, because that's a good profit center. And one of the things that we still haven't done that I think could be done, and it probably would involve hiring another person. Our restaurant has a large amount of space, and actually kind of has like an event center, an area with a dance floor, and it's underutilized. We rarely use it. So, but it would take a dedicated person that was, looking for weddings, looking for small business meetings, attracting a market base that's specifically for the venue. So
awesome. Well, that is our time for today. It was very interesting. This is the first time we've ever had an opportunity to really sit down and talk about what was up with that.
What were you thinking?
I told you all, if you've listened to this podcast for any amount of time, it blows my mind constantly how many things you have experienced in your life already. And it just blows my mind. So it's super cool for people to get to hear about this particular aspect, especially so many real estate investors follow us. And it's one of the things I really love about having the basis of understanding investment and real estate is that it touches everything we do. And there's so many facets of real estate that you can be in. And the way business and real estate intersect with each other, and why it just makes sense for this podcast when we talk about wealth building and it being a whole human experience. So it's been super cool to have this conversation with you. So thank you for being so open about
You're
that.
welcome. It was fun to talk about, because I haven't really talked about it in a cohesive way, I don't think, maybe ever. Just sort of highlights, or it's been okay. Those kind of answers.
It would be a really fun book. We bought a golf course.
Why did we buy a golf course?
What the heck
were we thinking? Subtitle. Are you crazy?
Yeah. All right. So we'll be back with you next week with another episode. And with all of that being said, I'm sending you so much love.
Be well, everybody.
Thanks for listening to the Conscious Edge podcast. Make sure you subscribe and take a moment to be kind and share this episode with someone you care about. Leave a review to help us bring more compassionate leaders building businesses and creating wealth to the table. And for show notes, head over to consciousedge.com/podcast. This podcast and the linked materials are presented solely for general information, educational, and entertainment purposes, and should not be taken as personal or medical advice or any kind of mental health treatment. Please consult a medical or mental health professional if you feel you need such services. Please be advised that all investing and entrepreneurial endeavors involve risk, and the use of the education and information on this podcast and linked materials is at the user's own risk.
This podcast is part of the Sound Advice FM network. Sound Advice FM, women's voices amplified.